task is to go into script.js. It's not too much code. It's a little bit, maybe refactor it a little bit maybe. But take a look at the lines here. It goes from 7 to 33, like, 25 lines of code. And I want you to analyze how this is working, and then we're going to have someone explain it to the rest of the class. Okay? Take a look. Drink all that coffee. I see Tim in there. Hey Tim, how's it going?
Hey Ranger.
Okay. If you have anyone going late, you can look at that link and see how the code works in script.js. How's it that we're creating this post-it note, dragging it, and changing the text. Irving, you want to give it a shot? Irving, you want to try to explain the code?
Sorry, can you skip me? I was looking at something else.
Oh!
Caught you.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Joining the class, he said.
Meg, you want to give it a shot?
Sure. I had a question though. There's like lines 7, 12, 14, and 15. You're not actually like using a variable type to declare your variable. Is there like a reason?
Yeah, so some of the stuff here, I'm going to not declare this with let or with const, just because it's actually global right here. And the point of to use let, const, or bars to constrain things within a certain scope. But here you basically are global. Very often when people are in global scope, but they just want to be formal in case it's used later, they'll do like let or const here. But it just doesn't make any material difference right now. So that's why I left it that way. The other reason I left it this way is just, because it's just simpler. It's just less to look at right now. But you're right, good style. I should use const when I create these functions. Yeah.
Okay, so you on the first line, you're creating a variable with the label note that's a div element, and then you're adding the note class to the div.
Mm-hmm.
Then for the inner HTML, you're adding the string new note onto that HTML div.
Mm-hmm.
So then line 10, you're getting the body of the HTML and appending that note object into there so that is rendering that note on the screen. Then
Keep going.
Then you define the Stringify function, and you define a function and store it into a variable with the label Stringify. And basically, it's going to take your parameter, which you have as fn, and turn it into a string. And then like return that parameter as a string with followed by event in parentheses. And then the next line, you're creating a function that console logs the word start and saving it as start, and then a function that console logs, or no, sorry. And then you're creating another function that you're saving it to end, and oh boy, you're
Let's break this down.
adding.
So I just commented start one. So start is just going to happen like I commented it out because we don't really totally need it right now. End is going to say like, hey, I'm going to do something. We'll go over what in a second. I'm going to do something when I'm called. So when does it get called? Okay, on drag end. So what is this? Note set attribute on drag end. What do you think?
That's a CSS attribute.
Yeah, it's a CSS attribute that tells you to do something when what happens.
When Stringify end is called. Or no, when the note is not being dragged anymore.
Yeah, we finally finished dragging the note. Okay, so Daniel, you mentioned in the chat that you can drag because it's draggable. That's true, but if we don't have the text in here, if we just say, hey, don't do any of this on line 16, then when we run it, when I drag, it's just going to go back to where it was. Draggable as an attribute just means you can click and drag something around the page, but it doesn't actually change the position. Okay, so we'll go over how that's happening in a second, but I'm changing that position on line 16. Okay, and I do something complicated here. I say, hey, Stringify, that just means take this and run this when I finish dragging the note. So what does Stringify do? It takes this function, it makes it a string, and adds parentheses with event at the end. So that's like saying, hey, run the following JavaScript as a string right here. And I put the parentheses and event there because I want to run. Okay? When you're calling a function, if you just say, hey, I want end, you won't do anything. But if you want to run, you do parentheses. And if you want to feed an argument, you have to be like, hey, do this. So it's basically just saying like, hey, do this. Uh-oh, this plugin crashed.
So you're kind of like creating an event listener without using add event listener.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So I'm just saying like, hey, this, and you've seen this before, anytime you've seen like on click as an attribute, that's an event, right? It's an event listener. It's just, you do it in the HTML. Okay. But you're right, you can totally do add event listener, and that's what I do down here with
Double.
the Stringify end thing. That might be complicating things a lot. Here's all I'm doing here. All I'm saying is this. We want to take the end function, call it with the event, and this just has to be a string because we're making attributes. And this should run the same way here. I added something there, this guy's on the wrong side of the quote.
Yeah.
Let's try that again. Okay. Yeah, that still works. So that's all that's happening here with the Stringify thing. Stringify might be too complicated. We can get rid of that. That's fine. So I'm refactoring as I go. We don't need all this stuff necessarily.
Yeah, but if you keep Stringify, like you can use it for different functions. Like you can do different things on and drag.
Yeah, that's totally right. And that's why I wrote it originally, but I just haven't used it that much. So I'm just kind of like, I think it was confusing people a little bit. So let me just try it this way. So anyway, I'm just saying like, hey, run the following JavaScript when someone stops dragging me. So in that JavaScript, we're going to say, hey, take the note, change the style, change the CSS text to be left this many pixels, top this many pixels. So if you look at my style for my note, I say, hey, my position is going to be relative. So, and thank you for helping us out, Meg. Someone else, what does position relative do? Anybody in the chat? Position relative?
Tim? Oh, go ahead, Meg. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It will position the note relative to its parent, right?
Yep. So in that case, top and left, we'll say if top starts as 0, the note's up here, because that's where the container starts, right? But we has 200. So we're changing the top and the left to change the position. Okay? So we're almost getting things right now, because we're saying like, hey, take the event and get client X and client Y and make those the new pixels. So we're almost getting this right. So when I try to go up here, he goes there. So why is it not going to the right spot? That's our first question.
Why is it not going to the right spot?
Yeah, why is this not going to the right spot? I'm going up here, it goes down there.
So can we like console log what client X and client Y is?
Totally. Let's try it. Console.log e.clientX e.client Y. Okay, run. 226, 117.
I guess it's like,
So Chris says everything else on the page.
That's from before. Like you were saying
okay.
in the position relative. Go ahead, Meg.
I guess it's easier to look and inspect tools because we're saying e.clientX, so like we're trying to see what exactly the event, like the properties of the event are.
Mm.
And so what's a client? Like what kind of, I have no idea, you know, like.
Okay, well, the client X, client Y is just, if you look at the mouse events page, I'll send this out to you guys. Mouse event on W3 schools. So we get some neat stuff that we can do. Go to chat. This is where I got client X, client Y. There's some neat stuff that we can use as part of the event. You can get the button that was clicked. You can get the movement. You can get client X, client Y. Let's take a look. Client X returns the horizontal coordinate of the mouse pointer relative to the current window. Client Y returns the vertical coordinate of the mouse pointer relative to the current window. So let's try something. If we go back in here, if I say, hey, I want to run this to start, and I make my style start 0px, 0px, right? Gonna run it. This thinks this is the top, and this is relative. What if I say absolute? What's the difference between relative there and absolute? Meg told us before, there, Javier, yeah, relative is for the parent. Chris and Javier got it, and I think that Meg said this before also. So if that's what we're using before, then absolute is in reference to the page. So let's try it now. And now we're getting closer. What's the problem now? Tim, what's the problem having now? I can't hear you, Tim. Maybe I'm mute.
Hang on, I just got distracted. As far as I just lost you after you said absolute, what does that mean?
So we said absolute. This fixed it a little bit for us. It said, hey, we're now using the correct coordinates because we're looking at the whole page, okay? But when I drag, where does the note end up right now?
I think earlier, were you moving it based on the text and not like the actual div?
Yeah, so earlier I was moving, I was trying to get the right coordinates, but earlier it was using the coordinates based on the whole window, but the styling, top and left, were moving me just inside of a slightly smaller box that started here, that started just like below that button, okay? So then I switched to absolute, so now it fixed it a little bit, but now whenever I drag it, the note ends up with the top left corner where the mouse was, even though I click and drag in the middle. So if we go back to our mouse event here, is there anything in here that could help us mathematically make it so that we're dragging the page, we're dragging the note to the right place?
Oh,
Is it the movement?
Offset,
Movement?
maybe?
Offset, I think those are good options. Let's look at movement and offset. So movement is returns the horizontal coordinate of the mouse pointer relative position of the last move. So that's pretty good. That could be like what we moved from our last event. That might work. That's basically how, hopefully that will give us how much we've moved since our last click. And then offset returns, so this one you'd have to do math with. This was Tim's idea. This is like, hey, relative to position of the target, where am I? So let's try with movement, and then let's try with offset. Okay, I'll go to my JavaScript. I'm gonna say, hey, instead of clientX, we are going to, here's the thing with movement is we'd have to already know the old position, and then we have to add to it. So I think that totally, I'm not sure if your name is Mars, that totally would have worked.
what about page?
What was that?
Page.
Back in here?
Yeah, because if absolute is relative to the page.
So returns the horizontal coordinate of the mouse pointer relative to the document when the mouse event was triggered. So you want to say like page X plus movement X? Is that your idea, Meg? Sort of combining what Mars was saying?
Well, I'm just thinking since now we changed the position to be absolute, so it's not referring to the body, it's referring to the actual document. Like making the movement of this, like, can we combine that offset in the page to like make that work. I don't know if there's a way.
Well, I
Like,
think the client is kind of doing something similar to page right now. So I do think we're going to use that. Let's combine that with offset. So I like where you guys are headed. We're going to do math with this. We're going to say like, hey, so you were saying whether it's page X or client X, you just want to, let's put this in parentheses here. So you want to do some math before we add it to the string. Is that right, Meg?
it seems like there's some sort of way we can figure this out.
No, I think, yeah, I think we almost got it. We almost got it.
It might
I
be,
think the two ways we talked about, as Mars was saying, if we had the old position, we could get the old position out and then add something to it. I think that totally works. I think it's just we have to figure out the old position. We don't have the old position yet. So I'm going to try to do it without that first if we can. And then you were saying maybe we have to add it to offset, and Tim was talking about offset. So I'm going to try to add this, and we'll see what we get here. Okay, so run this. Uh-oh, it jumped off the page. Maybe that was too much.
Interesting.
It seemed to go really far there. What if we did minuses instead of pluses? This. Doesn't seem to like that.
Like that.
So let's just take a look at what offset is giving us, okay? Or let's try. Offset X, offset Y, and let's also do E dot. What was our other thing? We said client X, client Y. Okay. So when we move something, we should be able to see everything. Little buggy here. Okay, so that's 126, 113, 126, 113. So these are actually coming out the same. So I think if we just did this, we said like, hey, let's just use the offset. So we're basically going to end up in the same place with our new note. The offset is more like the relative value. How it changed since the last one. So again, that kind of counts on the old one. Does anyone have any other ideas?
I was thinking of maybe seeing where the mouse actually clicks inside of the box and kind of, well, that's just some kind of idea. I haven't finished thinking about that.
That sounds good. How do we do that?
Double click.
What if we said, okay, I'm going to take the note and inspect this here. So we'll say that, hey, when we're inside, take a look and debug, okay? So run the code. Cool. So our debugger right here. Go on the console. Take a look at the event. Look at the target. So this gives us note. You can say like event dot. We can look at all these values. So we can have the client X, 21, Meg was saying PageX. Let's check that out. 1A1 also. So those are the same in this case. Go ahead.
Oh, I just said client and page are the same.
Yeah. Oh, well. So what else can we try here, guys, to get the relative value there?
What if there's, so who just had that idea about, sorry, about getting the actual click of the mouse?
Is that Mars?
Yeah, I think Mars was talking about that a little bit.
Because that target, if you do the target, I think you can get the coordinates somehow that way. Like E
target.
Target. Yeah, and then from there, target.
We have offset height, offset left. So I think Mars is talking a little bit about like doing things. So let's say we took out debugger here for a second. What if I said, hey, instead of just tracking end, we also checked what happened when we started the drag. So how do we do that?
You put a console log in that start.
Okay. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to create a function and do we do debug or console log, or does it matter? Let's say debugger. Yeah, so the debugger there, and we'll say, hey, when you're going to, does anyone know the attribute when you start to drag something?
On drag start.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's run this, try this. Debug
Wait a second.
doesn't like that. Let's try like this. Okay, cool. That doesn't debug for me right off the bat. Let's try console.log. Okay, so we're getting the event right there. You can get more information from this. So we're going to say, instead of console.log, we'll say like, let's give it to us. Let's see. Yeah, okay, cool. So now we're in here. We're going to take a look at E. Drag event. Okay. So now E dot, you guys wanted to look at offset before? offsetX 62. Any different from clientX? I spelled that wrong?
You put x.clientx.
Yeah. 61. That's interesting. Let's change the initial position, see if we get further on this. So this is going to be like, I'll start off at like 100 out, 100 out. Okay. So stop this, run this, inspector. Okay, cool. Okay, so now here, I'm going to drag event.
John just joined the call.
Oh, hi, John. Oh, John's the advanced one. Okay.
Hey, Grange.
Yeah.
I don't want to join too early and get caught up in all the basics.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, take a look at this here. E.offsetX is 43, and E.clientX is 142. Okay, so what can we use there? What do you think, Javier? What can we use there?
We lost here.
What was that?
No, I don't have any clue.
You have any clue?
No.
Anyone else? Difference between offset being 43, but E.clientX is 142.
It's minus top plus 1.
Yeah, it's minus 100, right? There's a 100 pixel difference. Why is there a 100 pixel difference?
Because the left offset?
Left. And then there's a 1 pixel border too.
Yeah, so it's because it's 100 away from the side. So one, it has to do the position in here, right? So I say this again, if I do this again, I don't know where my play button is here. No, yeah, like that. Okay. Okay, so now when I drag this guy, so I'm in the center of the square, and I say like the same stuff I was looking at before. ClientX is 145. OffsetX is 45. Okay. So what do we think my offset Y is going to be? Any guesses?
50.
So I think that Mars was right before. I think we can take those numbers and do something with them. What do you guys want to do with those numbers? I'm going to say the offset is, oh, you guys were with me for a second there. What do you think? What can we do with these numbers? What can I get right here?
I still don't really understand what offset is doing because I'm looking at the W3 schools and it says it's like the
So like when you click, when you're doing the mouse event, what's your relative distance compared to like the object you're interacting with in the mouse event there? So you click to drag down, it's only like 40 or 50 because I'm in the middle of the square, you know? But like, let's say that I say like, okay, we'll run this. Sometimes this thing crashes, okay. And I'm gonna drag from the top corner here. Okay, so if I console.log the offset e dot, well, if I just move this to the
so the offset is like where your like actual like pointer is, like the mouse, right?
yeah, saying, hey, I'm going to take the pointer and compare it to the object. So e dot offset x. Okay, we're just going to log this out when we run this. Okay, so if I click in the upper left corner here, it's like 5. It's almost 0, right? If I click in the lower right-hand corner, it's like 70. Okay, in the middle, that's freaking out me a little bit for a second there, but yeah, let's try it again. 50. Okay, it's a relative position from the edge of this thing. Top left being 0, 0, bottom right being like 100, 100 or something. So if I say, hey, whenever I click down, I'm going to store where I was in the box. So I'm going to say, hey, offset equals, and then we do curly brackets, x is going to be e dot offset x. So we're trying to say it's like, hey, when you click the box, how far were you from the edge of the box? Does that make sense to everybody? No, yeah?
Yeah.
Then we're going to save that information, okay? So what am I going to do with that information? Once I know, hey, was I at the edge of the box or the middle of the box? How many pixels was I from the top left corner? What can I do with that information?
What do you mean? Like, what can you do with knowing whether you're in the center or the top left-hand corner?
Yeah, Chris has it. You can adjust the placement based on that offset. So right now when we drag the box, we were ending up with, hey, if I do like the client X and client Y, and I run this, it ends up in the top left every time. So what if I said, hey, take the client, client X, and subtract wherever I was before, offset dot X.
Okay.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, so like,
A little buggy, but there you go. Got it. So what's happening there? Someone recap this for me. Chris, can you recap?
So I think what's going on is, so originally the issue was, it was just taking the coordinate of like the top left of the box, and that was kind of messing up where it was actually being placed. So once you figure it out, depending on where you click on the box itself, if you store those coordinates, the X and the Y coordinate, and then you actually subtract that from the, the client X and client Y, you basically adjust where you're clicking on the box from where you're placing it. It should more or less basically offset itself.
Yeah, so basically it's saying like, hey, the client X, basically, Dana, yeah. So the that's basically right. So we're saying like, hey, client X, where's my mouse, right? And we're saying, hey, if you say the top of the box should be where my mouse is, that's not great because then the box ends up too low. It's not where we expect to be when we click and drag. Okay, so we say, hey, the top and the left of the box should be where my mouse is. We would then always end up with the corner of the box there, not the middle of the box. So to adjust that, we're just keeping track of where we first clicked the box and subtracting that every time. So it ends up a little further up and to the left. That's the basic idea. Let's look at line 24. What is happening on line 24? Well, I'll tell you like the general idea. It's like I can double click, I can change stuff, I can click away. But how is that working? How is that working?
Ask questions, guys. You got 10 minutes.
like when you're double clicking the event, it's creating an input and setting that input's value to whatever isn't whatever text is inside that note.
Mhm.
And then you are adding it to, wait, no, not in, you're adding, wait, input. Yeah, you're adding that input to the note div, and then you're adding the event listener when you click off of it to set the, okay, I'm not getting it right.
No, you got it. So let's go through step by step. First, we create the input. Then we set the input's text equal to wherever the text used to be on the label, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we say, hey, the note shouldn't have any text while we edit it, okay? Then we take the input, we put it on the note. Then we say, hey, if we ever focus out of the input, then I want you to grab the text, take the input off, and make the text of the note wherever was typed in the input. And then we say, hey, focus on me, so that I'm automatically clicking inside the input. Okay, that's a neat little trick to show, to move the cursor, move the focus to the element you want. So since I start with my focus inside of here, whenever I click away, you'll do this code, which reassigns the value and takes the input back out. So we're always switching. We're like, hey, inner HTML or inner text, or is it input? Inner text, input. Inner text, input. And we switch based on the focus. So if you're not familiar with focus, it's just like, hey, does that thing have that blue rectangle on it? Is that the thing I'm clicking on? Is that the thing I'm typing on? That's where your focus is on the page.
Okay.
So let's we'll give you a couple extra minutes because we have some technical difficulties there, but I want to kind of move this in a different direction instead of just like watching me type stuff. Right now I have this button.
Focus.
Go ahead.
Is focus like just included with the JavaScript library?
Yeah, focus is part of the, well, it's doesn't exist in the language, it exists in the browser there. So it's a method that's going to exist on the HTML node that you can use to like draw focus to an HTML element.
All right.
Good question. So you can use focus to like, hey, the user should start on this part of the form. This happens all the time when you have like a non-obvious form. That should be like, hey, they should actually be on this part, not this part when they first fill things out. You know, sometimes you'll accidentally get a focus on like an H1 when you really want it on a form. That'd be a good place to use it. So let's say that I wanted to make this button new note work, okay? I wanted to go from a world where I had one note to a world where I could make like, 50 notes and drag them all around the page. What would I have to do conceptually to change my code?
You would first have to grab that button,
Mm-hmm.
the element,
Mm-hmm.
and then on click, you would make a new note, a new div of another note.
Yes, that's a good place to start. We have an event, we listen to the click of that button, okay? But right now, so I think that's totally right. Then we'd run into a little problem, which is that all of my code just says note, 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 note. It's just referring to one global variable, one note, okay? So what would we have to change conceptually at that point? I think that's right, Meg, yeah. I have to make a class. So Meg, what would a class do? So, Mari's saying start with the event listener, and then when you're saying use a class, what would the class get us there, Meg?
It's like a template, so we could make a class with a constructor to just build out what we need for each note, and we could put these methods inside our class so each note would have access to these event listeners and the start and end function.
Yeah, I think a class would be great here. We could say like, hey, we're gonna make a class called note class. And then we'll say like, hey, anytime someone makes a new note, we're going to have these methods. And these methods will be things like, hey, edit me, or hey, like, start and end or whatever. And we can keep track of state in each note, like the offset, that could be a piece of state in each note. So because you can't use offset to keep track of every single note, you know, they can't all have the same position. We could have that be a variable inside of it. So I think that'd be a great way to do it. I say like, hey, start with what Mars and Daniel said. We have an event listener, and then you have that class there. And finally, conceptually, let's say that we wanted to hang on to the text of these notes in the long term and not lose it when we reload the page. What solution would you guys use there? We don't want to lose our information. What are some possible solutions there?
Local storage or database?
The local storage, it would just store us in there. I think probably a database solution would be good. I think like Firebase would be really nice, right? We could do an AJAX call. I think, you know, you could do WebSockets to keep things constantly updated. Or you could just do it on events. Which events would you, the cookie would be interesting, Daniel, but we'd lose it if we did like, you know, if we went on a different computer, right? We won't be able to come back to a URL and still have everything. So I think that AJAX calls are probably the way to go. To some database. Which events would you make which calls on? Which events should trigger an AJAX call?
New note.
New note, definitely. That's right. What else?
You can double click on the note.
I think probably maybe on the double click, but maybe on the focus out, you know? Maybe on that,
Right.
like someone focuses out there, that's kind of save. I can see
Right.
that. And I think one more event would have an AJAX call. What do you guys think?
When you move the note.
Yeah, when you move it, the end thing. Maybe you should call it end move instead of end. End sounds a little bit depressing. It's called move. Okay. So I still would recommend in most cases using like a visual library like jQuery UI to do most of this stuff. But you can see how this is done in jQuery UI now behind the scenes. Yeah. If you turn off draggable here, does anyone know what will happen?
Can't move it.
Can't move it. And even if you don't have the event listener, what draggable does is you probably all have this experience on a website where even without this function that actually moves it, you run it, draggable creates this dragging image. So if you ever want to configure that on your website, that's the attribute there. So first of all, did you guys know how to do any of this stuff? How to do like the dragging and all these events? That's something you've run into before or no?
Just a little bit.
A little bit?
I think I make event listener, but we never messed with dragging things. So this was pretty interesting.
Yeah, same. I just learned about event listeners. I haven't like practiced too much with anything but on click.
Well, yeah, I think that it's good that you had some background in it, and I think that like you just have to think anytime you see some fancier library doing something, at some point it gets down to like vanilla JavaScript. So if you're using like jQuery UI, you're using React, you're using Angular, and there's some sort of special library that lets you click and drag or lets you do a visual effect, at some point that's actual code. That's like detailed code. So you can do it, is all I'm saying. So you can do that. You can write your own libraries. You can do your own stuff. You know, it all comes down to stuff like this. A few announcements. One is that Nico, did we get the recording back on or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna be posting recordings to class. There might be a problem